Hello, everybody. One more present from us here at RCI TV for the year 2022. We made a promise when this year began to begin racing on iRacing, and we are not ones to ever break our promise. Live for the very first time on the RCI TV network, live iRacing action. Hello, I'm Jesse Lee, joined by Ryan Mawson, with Ryan Gill in the box controlling the cameras tonight. Ryan Mawson, it's a very different venue, but also a very familiar place we find ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. The track may be familiar, but the sim and the cars that are racing on it are very much not. It's going to be incredibly interesting to see, the drivers who are from ACC, how they come over to iRacing. I know quite a few people do it in their spare time, but it's going to be super, super interesting. And also cars that might finally get some racing with a manual box. I wonder how many people have practiced their heel and toe downshift into two.
That's indeed correct. Manual cars, it's going to be very interesting. It's very different to what some of these drivers will be used to. But before we get into that, let's take a look at what we're dealing with today. It's mixed grid Toyota GR86s and Mazda MX-5s multi-class racing for you here at WeatherTech Raceway, Laguna Seca. The track temp isn't, the ambient temp isn't too bad, 18 degrees C. The track's absolutely baking, though, at 46 degrees C. Of course, we are in the United States. The altitude at 228 the meters above sea level. Track length, of course, 3.57 kilometers around. Nothing to complain about weather-wise. The partly cloudy skies, just a mild 2-kilometer breeze, and not the most intricate of racetracks, but of course it also has the Andretti hairpin turns number 2, and of course the world-famous corkscrew at the top of the hill,
which we've already seen a few people in practice trying to hook it like they might do in some other sims. And well, you can't do that here. The dust and the sand that gets kicked off from people going off onto the racetrack really does affect the grip in iRacing. And we've seen multiple spins of people just trying to get used to these cars and get used to where you can and can't push them. It's not even like a GT4 car that some people might say when they say that they've driven a slow class before. These are road cars. They're road tires. You push them, you will slide off.
Certainly is the case. Practice is coming to a close. Now, unlike per usual, they had over 2 hours of practice. They'll have 20 minutes of qualifying ahead of them. And of course, they will run a 60-minute multi-class race. The Toyotas racing their own race, and the Mazdas doing the very same. The Toyotas have a little bit of a pace advantage, I think it's safe to say, but we'll see. We certainly believe, at least in the middle of the pack, Ryan, that we will see the two different classes intermingle there.
Well, at the minute as well, if you look, you've got Joe Dauber right behind Jordan Daly, even though it's two separate cars and two drivers who'll be very familiar with racing themselves. So that's going to be a real shake-up if that's where they qualify. And Wallace is really managing to push that Mazda quite high up into the Toyota pack there with the 137.3. And then you've got Johnson, who's just running away with it in practice so far in that Toyota.
Johnson, of course, a very good iRacer in his own right, and certainly showing it here today at RCI's inaugural iRacing event. That 35.9 looming very large, just about a second quicker than anybody else. More than winning a race like this, as practice has officially come to an end and qualifying has begun, like I was saying, just taking part, being here for an event like this is very special. You get to say you saw the genesis of something, or you participated in the very beginning of something like this. The drivers are excited. We're excited here in the booth as well to get this going.
And like I said, it's going to be so interesting to see what happens in the race, when people try starting pushing these cars in kind of more of a race scenario, because, it's all right running around for those 2 hours in practice. You might be able to, get used to your car, but you're going to have to relearn your racecraft almost all over again just for another sim. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see as the Toyotas and the Mazdas start to file out.
Here they come, the green flag signifying the beginning of qualifying. 20 minutes to get quali done. Your quickest lap will count, and wherever you qualify is wherever you're going to start. I don't think the two classes will be separated, though we'll check on that. 30-plus cars, by the way, split up between the two classes. Every driver for themselves. No driver changes, nothing like that. We'll talk more about what could potentially play out in the pits after the conclusion of qualifying. But for right now, the most important thing, setting a good lap. Getting out there, running some smooth laps, proved a bit difficult in practice, didn't it, Ryan? You mentioned that yourself in the corkscrew, hitting the drain at the bottom of the screw and absolutely going around. But Jordan Johnson probably won't have any of those issues based on their pace. And let's follow them around. They seem to know how to get around here.
Certainly so. It seems that Johnson was just absolutely running away with it, really trying to warm the tyres up before going for that run, and that is also a thing that we've seen in multiple sims, not just iRacing. It's always a big, push to get the tyres warmed up as you come across the line. Turn 1 officially is this little kink, but the amount of race drivers who don't even classify it as that, you've got to watch out for the bollards on the inside, and like some sims, you cannot cut it down into the Andretti hairpin. Lay on the brakes. You see how much these cars roll around versus a lot of the machinery that we're used to around here, and you get runs like this up to 3 where it is an actual straight. A bit of a curve taken there by Johnson as we go under the Firestone Bridge. You're looking for the apex. It's a late one. You've got to pitch the car in and not run wide. Kick of the gravel here will really hurt your run, even more so than it would in any GT3 machinery under the Mother's Bridge. And then the nose dips hard as you're hard on the brakes in the run up the hill. Try not to run too wide out once again. Every single time in a slower car, you ruin your run. It costs so much more. Can be fully committed through the fast left kink there. A bit of dust kicked up. You saw having to almost catch the car there. You really have to be careful with some of these slow cars. And then this is the corkscrew, the famous corkscrew. Look at the elevation change here. Look at all the dust on the inside of the track. That will ruin your lap time if you get it wrong, completely wrong. And then back down the hill. A great view from the top of the hill. I've seen some pictures up there before. Looks absolutely fantastic. And coming up the penultimate corner, you've got to also watch that sausage curb on the inside. It will also send you spiraling off. And a last corner, a little bit of a cut there from Johnson, and I think it's going to be a very, it's going to be a very clean lap time. Might not be the fastest that we've seen yet, though, as he comes racing up to the line, and that will complete your lap 1.
Sure will, and that lap will be a 36.195. That's about 2/10 off of what they were able to do, and I just wonder on the road up to the corkscrew if going a little bit wide there and having to counter-correct the car may have lost them a tenth or so and maybe done a little damage to her confidence. Several other cars coming across the line here, all in the 38s, and of course I believe a yellow line means I'm pretty sure that means they're Toyota, and the blue line, of course, is indicative of a Mazda. And if I'm very much not mistaken, red means they're not on a valid lap or something like that. We'll try to keep you updated with all the brand new graphics that we have. And it looks like Dozal comes in P2. Rudy Philmont for third in the Toyota class. And in the Mazda class, Joe Dauber holding a lead over Yo and Webb. And that is how it's shaken out here on the first lap or so. That track is going to get incredibly congested, Ryan, isn't it? With all these cars, 2 different classes, of course, on this somewhat small racetrack.
Well, we can already see here just the Mazda starting to get intertwined with the Toyotas as they pull over side for the 27. This is Bart Matcher running a little bit wide and catches it, has to lock the brakes up, and that will not help Bart Matcher's time. But that is how easy it is to lose the Mazdas. You go that tiny bit wide, that's it. You have to be on your tip of your toes to catch it, otherwise it's completely gone. Ted Edwards also joining in this race, a very familiar face. Look at the livery that Ted's running.
I wonder if that is a bespoke handmade livery. Of course, trading paint's a big part of iRacing's identity, but I wonder if maybe that is custom made by the Edwards family. They tend to produce fantastic looking liveries. It is the season. I happen to know Ted loves the holiday season, and why wouldn't you? And lovely looking festive car here today, looking to get even further up the leaderboard, a 39.131. The last time they ran a lap, they're on an out lap here. Oh my goodness, and having to catch the car, and they're not going to be able to. It's a huge off, straight off into the wall, and that will mean a reset for the Ted Edwards car.
Well, that shows how twitchy these Mazdas can be. It was only the tiniest touch of the gravel unsettled the car, and they just couldn't catch it, you know, with the downhill momentum, always fighting against you. Just ended up off the road, but Ted's still got quite a lot of time to reset and, you know, bring that car back down. I'm now looking towards the 95. Phil Webb currently in that P3 for the Mazdas. This is a car that we saw, you know, having sort of pushing the limits of the Mazda in the practice, and really, you know, having a few offs, managing to get it much better hooked up. Look at the drop of the corkscrew, and he's not going to make it. He's not going to make it.
Ooh, my goodness, that was very nicely saved, and I dare say I would not have been able to counter correct. Usually what the most likely outcome is you hit the passenger side of the car into the barrier, facing the wrong way, looking back up the corkscrew. Phil Webb did not do that. As a matter of fact, saved it, and wasn't even an issue for the cars behind them, but still a very scary moment. Ryan, you highlighted that before qualifying even started. These are road cars. These are not purpose-built race cars like we're used to seeing. They've got different tires on them. It's a very different situation. Obviously, the dirt kicked up on the racetrack is its own different animal in and of itself. And of course, you're also dealing with traffic. You've got the Planet Express Mazda getting up on two wheels. Absolute chaos. There's a little part of me that's sad they're not out there right now, though.
Yeah, I didn't think about racing in this, but it's always more fun sometimes to watch from the box. You get to see, you know, people on two wheels, people pushing each other along the tracks, and people really trying to push the limits of these cars. Whereas sometimes if I was racing, I'd see that for maybe lap one, and then would be backwards in the wall after I've tried to take corkscrew a little bit too vigorously.
Have been told by Chet that that was not a bespoke made livery on the Ted Edwards car. It certainly fooled me there for a moment, but a lot of trading paints liveries that I do recognize on these machines. Lovely looking cars as they continue to work qualifying here. 35.772 by Johnson, the quickest thus far. Rudy Philmalter has taken over P2. Jordan Daly has snuck their way into third place with a 37.065. 2 or 3 tenths off of second place. Currently will start on the second row. Wallace, the quickest in the Mazda class, and they have a straighten behind them in a Toyota. And then it's Yo and Dauber fighting it out for the top 3 spots right now. Everybody else looking to get into the 37s.
Very, very close between both of the classes. If you discount Johnson, we're just gonna ignore Johnson for just a brief moment here. But if you look at everyone else, including the Mazdas and the Toyotas, they're all very, very close. I think this is going to be some fantastic racing when we do get to go, because we've seen how easily, you know, it can come undone for you. One touch of the gravel is a lot more detrimental to your race than it is in a lot of the other cars around here.
Another thing, if you're used to watching RCI TV that you may not be very familiar with is, oh my goodness, another thing coming out of the corkscrew, that's heavy damage there. And one thing that you might not be very familiar with is a lot of times you will see what appears to be smoke. It is sometimes smoke. It's more likely dust around here. That happens in between where the camera is pointed and what it's looking at. It stays. The dust clouds, they do not evaporate immediately. They will hang around for quite some time. That includes the smoke, just adding yet another obstacle for these drivers.
Yeah, I mean, if you come around the corner and, you know, there's someone's had an off, there will now be a new thing to deal with. The dust cloud you might not necessarily be able to see, as we've seen now that you know, a cloud has come over the sky. It's gone very dark all of a sudden as the sun's been blocked by it. But, you know, it adds another sort of element to racing, is the visuals can change lap to lap now.
Yeah, absolutely. The track is dynamic as well. We call that in America catching a cloud, that being a positive connotation, because obviously the track's cooler, the speeds go up, and that's how it works in iRacing. The clouds come over the racetrack, you gain a little extra speed. It will matter. Without direct sunlight, that track will cool, at least momentarily. until the sun re-emerges. You got to get it while the getting's good.
Yeah, and for all these cars that are, more road cars, you're sliding it around, you're really pushing the limits of what these tires can do, and on a track that 40 plus C, track temperature, they are going to be absolutely burning up. So you've really got to take that opportunity while you can, as everyone's still filing around. Johnson's still out there miles ahead with a 35.7. Rudy Philmalter has not yet improved, and he's got John Daly breathing down his neck just outside of that 37s, and the Mazdas are starting to slowly sort themselves out. There's not as many Mazdas as I thought there might be in the Toyota pack from what we saw in practice, but we see in the background, look, more carnage in the Mazda category.
Certainly is, and we know a lot about the Mazda Cup cars. They're a staple of iRacing. They're very fun, of course, included in the base package subscription of iRacing. It's a lovely car to have fun in, and it's one of those that, depending on what track you're at, depends on how it races. It's a very dynamic automobile as well. You can learn a lot of fundamentals in a car like that. One car that we're not familiar with, or less familiar with, I should say, that recently just released is that Toyota GR86. An interesting car in its own right, a little bit quicker than the Mazda Cup car. But Ryan, I'm just curious from your perspective, what do you think about the GR86?
Seems to be a lot more of a stable car than the Mazdas, will at least say that. I haven't ever even looked at the new Toyotas. It's just sort of they slide by me, really, because I'm somewhere stuck in about 1986 really with my taste of cars. But it's going to be interesting to see what it does as a competitive race car. I'm kind of looking forward to when they start cropping up in VLN or the bigger iRacing events, to see what some of the people can actually do with them, because right now everyone is kind of in this stage of it's a new car and having to learn and work out what it's really good and what doesn't work. And the other great thing about the Toyota, it doesn't matter if you're new to iRacing and you don't necessarily have the content, because it's free.
Absolutely correct. That's the greatest thing about this. You could have entered this race just by having an iRacing subscription and no additional cost required. And just as we talked about how good and planted the GR86s looked, we see one loop it at the top of the hairpin of all things, but luckily the track self-cleaning there, no further incident. And that's the good thing from this quali session. I think it bodes well for the race. We're seeing a ton of single car spins as everybody is on the ragged edge going for it, but not a single multi-car incident thus far. And again, I feel like that bodes well for us here tonight.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those. We'll have to see if our commentators' curse powers still work in iRacing. I'm fairly certain that they are going to, but I think a lot of the times as well that these cars are so different, that there's not going to be enough opportunities for them to fight one another. For example, I think that the Toyotas do have, at least from what we're seeing, that little bit extra in through the corners. So as much as they might be somewhat similar on the straights, you end up getting to a corner, the Toyota will run away, and then the Mazdas are kind of left to their own devices.
Qualifying continuing here. You can see the qualifying timer in the top left corner of the screen. And Tom Bryant saw the edge of the track approaching on the right corner of his screen. Qualifying just about complete here, as we only have 5 minutes left. Flying laps, of course, will count here in qualifying. The current mark to beat, that 35.772 by Johnson. I dare say I don't think anyone will trouble him for pole position. Rudy Philmalter's got the closest, just about a second off of that pace. Wolf up to P3 in the Toyota class now. Daly and then Taplin, your top five. Here we have Tom Bryant near the back of the Mazda field, and that car looks a little bit worse for wear already.
Yeah, some people picking up some damage already, because that's the other thing that this sim will simulate. the throwing it over these massive sausage curbs and slamming the car around, you will get floor damage. But what you can get in the Mazda, which I didn't even know was a thing until recently, a 23-hour event at Zolder that a team was driving, the team that I know that was driving this Mazda. It turns out if you throw it over the curbs for about 18 hours, you can damage the engine. You can pick up damage to the sump. And what this does, after a little while, is grenade your engine, as they discovered, and had to replace the engine before they could go back out on track. And that is also another thing that you can do in iRacing quite easily. You know, I mentioned these cars are manual earlier on. Well, if you fumble with a gear stick, if you have a proper gated shifter, and you find first when you wanted third, for example, well, your engine's going to you're going to send number 3 piston into orbit.
You sure can, and we've seen over the years a lot of mistakes happening with shifting. I will self-admit I've done that on more than a couple of occasions myself, being a battle and not be thinking about doing the cleanest shifting, and then shifting into the wrong cog, and then all of a sudden, kablamo, you're out of the race. Though I don't believe that is possible here today, at least at the very beginning of the race, for reasons we will explain. Though they can grenade the engine still. They can mess up the car and bash in the suspension by hitting some of the curbs really hard. Hopefully we don't see that, though admittedly we have already today seen cars flying a little bit off of some of these curbs.
Yeah, very much so. And we've got another familiar face coming along who has, I think they've yet to set a time, but it's the 171. It's Martin has come to join us here at Laguna Seca. This will be interesting to see what he can do in the little Mazda.
It is interesting. Chat's already pointed this out. We are reading chat as we always are here on RCI TV. We thank you for joining us this evening and watching the inaugural iRacing event here on RCI with us. We're all ecstatic. You're ecstatic in chat as well about it, and we love to see that enthusiasm. 34 cars currently on the track. There could be one or two that joined, but I doubt it. I think this is what we have. 34 in 2 different classes, and of course, above all, it's going to be just a record night for us. Something that we thought we would have done earlier on in the year. We finally got to this point. And this is just the beginning, definitely not the end of our foray into iRacing. Thanks for being here, of course, and leave a like, subscribe, and do all that for more fantastic racing content in 2023. Into the year already, Mawson. Where'd it go?
No, I was thinking this not that long ago, thinking, you know, what happened to this year? It's not even been a year that's been, you know, crazy with world pandemics or we've been stuck inside or anything. It just seemingly has flown by, and the amount of racing and, you know, great racing that we've had in that time. As he says, we just didn't get around to the iRacing in time, but it's month 12, we have fulfilled it, and I'm really looking forward to see what we've got in 2023, you know, especially with some of the series that are planned.
Coming up later in this broadcast, a formal announcement for some of the future goings-on for the very beginning of 2023 here. You're going to want to hear what's in store for, well, a bunch of different sims, as it turns out, for us next year. We have that announcement for you later, but as for now, the final the final 30 seconds or so of qualifying. Johnson has done it again. It was a 35.7. It's a 35.427 now, as he further lowers the bar and further gaps everybody in the Toyota class. Meanwhile, the battle still continues to be incredibly close in the Mazda Cup class, as they're very close to one another, a 10th here, a 10th there, and in certain places, it's not even that different between all of them. Some of the cars teetering on that line, low 38s rather, for the Cup car competition.
Martin Lawrence crossed the line a smidgen behind Ted Edwards, but he does get one more go at the lap as everyone across the line within that time. Then they're on that final flying lap, and it will count this as well. This is Johnson's final lap, way out ahead. Don't think the number 12 needs to find any more time really in this lap, but they're basically doing it for bragging rights. They're just saying that, look, I can go just a little bit faster in a car that's brand new. I dare say that if they took the Mazdas, they throw it up the curbs. It's a last do or die attempt from Johnson, way out into the gravel, keeps it going. But I dare say if they were in the Mazda and something that was known, they might be even faster.
I gotta say, I respect a driver, talking about Johnson, that has a gap of more than a second, but doesn't give up, continues to try and improve, must know in his heart that there's more in it, that they can do better, that there's always something to aspire to, and they continue. They don't give up, they don't settle for that'll do, and you love to see it. The commitment, absolutely 10 out of 10, you have to say. Joe Dauber just ran a blitzingly fast lap in the Mazda Cup car, a 37.303, good enough to take provisional pole. That will be the end of qualifying for that particular car. Everybody coming to the line as the qualifying session has come to an end.
That was an absolutely blistering last lap from Joe Dauber. The 22 managing to find that just that extra little 5% in that Mazda. So that's going to be really interesting to see in the race. But that has mean that we do have a tiny bit of a mix-up between the Toyotas and the Mazdas at the front end of the field. The fast Mazdas are going to get tangled up with the slow Toyotas.
Sure is. We expected as much. It was always a possibility, and we theorized about it before we went on air this evening, and that's just part of multi-class racing. You know, Ryan, most communities would start off with a single car race and do it that way. Not us. That's just not our style. Multi-class immediately.
Well, like you said, that's just not how we do here. You have to give the drivers some kind of incentive or punishment, depending on which side of the fence you fall on. But really, I think a lot of the drivers were actually kind of excited that when I was talking to them, that it was going to be a multi-class. You know, originally being the GT4, and a lot of people were still quite happy about that. And then they said, actually, what if we run the Toyota? And people still said, yeah, sure, we'll do that. So this is your results of qualifying. Jordan Johnson just a county mile ahead there, 1.3 seconds ahead of Rudy Philmalter. And Adam Wolf is the top 3 in the Toyota category. Tom Watts only just outside of there as well. And for the Mazda class, you've got Joseph Dauber put in that absolutely monstrous last lap push to take the pole position from Stephen Wallace. And Phil Webb rounds out the pole position in that.
Sure does. And I was just remembering what I was going to say a little bit earlier on, and I went on a ramble like I tend to do because I get into it and I forgot. There's a lot of names on this entry list that we recognize from other sims, from what we normally are used and accustomed to doing here. There are a couple of names that we don't recognize as well, and that's really cool. The expansion of the RCI racing family is always near and dear to our heart, but just so many drivers that we recognize throughout the entire list. I'm refraining from naming any specific because I don't want to make anyone mad because I didn't give them a shout out. So shout out to everybody on this grid.
Yeah, very much so. We're so happy that you have come and joined us for what is our Pro Racing Club International's inaugural iRacing event. Is like you said, it was so cool to see all of the sign-ups and knowing that these are people who we've raced with before, but the new people who've come out of the woodwork have come because they want to be a part of an RCI iRacing event. You know, it's so awesome to see.
Well, here we have the starting lights on the screen, the pace truck out in front of the field, final minor adjustments being made if allowed. Everybody taking a moment, taking a deep breath, and getting ready to set off and make history for the very first time. The pace truck will go around one time, dart down the pit lane, and we will be under starters' orders. The entire 33-34 car grid setting off into the literal unknown. And we talked about the Toyota being a brand new car to iRacing in general, unlike the Mazda Cup car that has a incredibly prestigious history. The Toyota completely unknown to almost everybody, and this will be interesting to see just on that basis alone. We talked about the middle of the pack being intermingled between the two classes. How's that going to work out? How's that going to go? And of course, we also have a little housekeeping to do up here in the booth. There is no live stewarding for this event. This is a one-off event, so none of that. We do have race control on tap. If there is a massive calamity that occurs at the start of the race, we will not restart the race, as you might expect. We're just going to put the pace truck back out, throw a caution, line them back up, and let them continue racing. Now, the timer will not stop, of course. It'll continue to tick down under that safety car in that event. Now, I don't think that's going to happen, but that is still a possibility you need to be aware of. On top of all of that, there shouldn't be a required pit stop in this race, but there is, in the case of massive damage. Let's say you hit a wall really hard, there is a fast repair. That's an iRacing exclusive thing, where if you damage the car and maybe you've bent the steering, you've got some sort of mechanical failure, you can come down pit lane and not have to sit there for an entire minute to repair the car. It's an instant repair. Every car has one of those. We'll call it a mulligan pit stop if needed for damage.
Yeah, so we've essentially given you one freebie whoopsies to use up, but you're gonna have to watch after and look after your car as everyone lines up 2 by 2. We're waiting there. The red illuminates that it's gonna be almost for the green flag on the inaugural RCI iRacing event, and there we are, green flag, and look at the Toyotas behind.
Couple of little contacts there. You see some of the Mazda Cup cars falling back ever so slightly there, trying to not make a land rush style start into turn number 2 in the Andretti hairpin. Nearly everybody making it through. They're 3 abreast in the back. There's a little bit of argy-bargy going on, a little bit of fender banging as they all figure it out by the time they get through 3. Nobody climbing the curb here on this very first lap. That was a very nice start.
Very clean start despite the 2-3 wide, as he says. A little bit of door touching here and there, but that's just kind of what happens when everyone's getting used to them. Saw a few people making some moves down into the Andretti hairpin, but as the positions sort themselves out, it is still Johnson and Phil Malta. But Britcher has moved up into the P3. Tom Watts has fallen down, and Jordan Daly's in 5th place.
That was nice. Daly qualified 6th. He's up 1 spot, back inside the top 5 for the moment. And look at these drivers go. They're still too wide. Now, normally here at WeatherTech Laguna Seca, we talk about this. You want to get single file as quickly as possible in these cars because of the relatively compact nature of them. I don't think that's a big concern here. Of course, you do lose time being side by side. The bigger time loss, what you just saw there, running off of the racetrack. Look at this excellent racing back into the Mazda Cup class. The 23 car has gone off of the racing surface. They'll be able to rejoin without further assault. And look at this. There's a Toyota amongst them, diving down the inside of the final turn, and they've just about got it done.
There's 2 Toyotas diving down as well as we ride on board with where look at the view from on front. This is just absolutely not a view that we're used to seeing at all. Taking the wide line into the Andretti hairpin as the Toyotas are darting everywhere, trying to find some space. There's still a master on the inside, and that's Jordan Daly up ahead in the 197, I believe, still trying to duck and dart. You can just about see him all the way up there as the Toyotas had a little bit of a wobble, and now it allows the Mazdas to get alongside, and the 23 has been turned.
Oh, and he's been ejected back onto the racetrack. Hopefully everybody being very heads up, a local yellow in that area. Hopefully people saw that Mazda get spat back onto the racing line in between turns 3 and 4. I think everybody else was able to miss it, but you could almost see that coming from where's in-car cam. They were all jammed up there, and in front of him, a massive incident with one car, and that has destroyed that Mazda Cup car.
I think that might be one of the first fast repairs to have to be used for that Mazda. It was very much a hard hit into the wall and spat back out onto the racing circuit.
Verstraeten here up 2 spots from where they started. Now, I would have thought Verstraeten, based on practice, would have been a little bit further up, just unable to get quite the lap time they were looking for, but even still now trending in the right direction. They've got Wolf behind them, and of course, that's Les Stevenson in the background, also known as the Fat Stig, getting into some iRacing. And what on earth has happened there to Verstraeten's car? Just looked like it bogged down in the final turn, and that might lose him a spot.
Yeah, very much didn't have the run that they wanted onto the main straight, and that's going to end up being 3 wide coming down into the Andretti hairpin. I think there's still 3 wide up ahead. Nope, they've managed to sort themselves out. Les Stevenson's been hung out to dry on the outside though. Can't even close the door down because there's a Mazda there just about squeaking in front of the 95. That's Phil Webb, who's now trapped basically in a Toyota sandwich. There's just carnage everywhere, and this is essentially P4 in the Mazda class. Phil Webb trying to get back up to where he qualified.
Somehow, Jelle Verstraeten was able to keep their position and fend off the likes of Wolf and everybody else. Les Stevenson, in fact, took a position from Webb instead. I'm assuming Verstraeten was able to use the inside line that they were on to beat them into the Andretti hairpin. Now, this is incredible stuff here. A lot of the Mazda Cup cars have all grouped together. You've got Yan Yo leading this group, Ted Edwards, Barbacha, Tom Bryant, all in one line together. All of these drivers have raced each other in other sims before, but today it's a very different animal. It's a very different car, though the names are still the same. I love parity in racing.
Yeah, very much so. Even Ted Edwards having a look up there on Yan Yo, just up into the the first part of the corkscrew, but just a little bit too far back. And this is kind of what is so awesome to see in the slower class cars. It is very, very difficult to pull away from anybody, and one small mistake can cost you hugely in this racing. As in the background, Joe Dorber's decided that he's got bored of sitting behind that Toyota, trying to make the move around the outside.
That's a very bold move by Joe Dauber, trying to get by Gunny Sue, and Ismail will likely not want to give up that spot. Of course, 2 different classes here today, and it's all for pride today, by the way. No championship, no points. This is very much just the inaugural tester event of iRacing. Thus far, I have to say, it has been a fantastic show. Look at that big slide out of turn number 4 by the 95. That's going to lose them 2, 3, maybe 4 spots as they go 3 wide. They're going to have to sort this out before they head up the hill, and they have.
Just about the 2 HWT cars, but that might have compromised their run. The 95 is still up the inside. They're going to be 3 wide again with the 27 and the 48. You're going to have to sort it out, lads, before the fast left. And there you go. Just about. Phil Webb deciding that backing out will be the better part of valor here. But look, the 2 teammates are still fighting with another, pushing each other up the hill.
Smart driving by everybody there to calmer heads prevailed, at least for the time being. Bart Macha realizing that it wasn't worth it to try and make a lunging move down to the corkscrew. In fact, just pushes his teammate Tom Bryant through that particular section of the racetrack. Says, I'm not going to risk my race just because I'm a little bit quicker here and there's no real overlap, but right now might be the time. You can make an outside pass in low horsepower cars here. I've seen it before. Will we see Macha be able to hang it around the outside? Yes, he will. It's going to be a drag race. The outside line should prevail here down into the hairpin, but will he be able to outbrake his teammate? I don't think he's going to have to. I think he's going to get clear before they even make it to Andretti hairpin.
But then you've got the inside of the kink of turn 1. It's brought it back into Tom Bryant as he swoops across the nose to Bart Macha, chops the nose off of his teammate, says you're not having that. And there we go. And in the background, that's Martin Lawrence that has spun around.
Martin Lawrence has spun around in the background there and has lost several spots, but I don't think they hit anything, only the time loss, and luckily as well, I also believe they spun off into the dirt. That would be less tire degradation for sure if that was the case. It's so easy to get caught up in a race like this, and you can make a mistake and it could end your race. There's 2 cars off here, one on the left, one on the right. Here's the other one. That's Rob Taplin, who I don't know if they were reacting to what they saw in front of them, but they skidded off in the opposite direction at the same time.
And wondering if it was basically the same incident, but we saw, Taplin ended up making it, switching back and ending up making it to the wall, whereas the other Toyota managing to just about keep it on the road. But scary moments when you end out over there. You just completely lose any kind of grip, and you're fighting to keep control of the car over there.
That's very interesting. You know, I've never had something I was saying happen that quickly before. What I was saying was everything looks so calm and controlled right up until the point that it isn't. It's so very minute, the little details between a good corner and a bad one around here in these cars. Ryan Mawson highlighted some of the struggles of production-based racing, and that's what this is. And I think you saw it very much there on that entire last lap. Everything could be completely fine for 8 or 10 minutes, and then all of a sudden it all kicks off, and one little mistake leads you into a gravel trap, or even worse, as we just saw, into a wall.
And not even just one small mistake, maybe taking lines that, you would take in other race cars. Bouncing the curbs in these cars seems to massively affect your run. You can see how soft the suspension is. They're much more compliant, but doing so really upsets the run. You just end up being crept up on through what is, Laguna Seca is not a track where you would say you have many straights, but the slower you make the cars, those little points between corners do start to become mini straights, and you can end up going too wide, whether you like it or not.
100% the case. And on top of that, in endurance racing, anytime if you've ever seen a team race, of course the 24 at Daytona coming up in January for iRacing, if you race in that, your teammates will all tell you, listen, we got to stay off the curbs for like 15 hours, meaning that you can't be banging the curbs for 24 hours. It's going to mess up the car. This is a 1 hour race. That doesn't matter. You're going for it on every lap. That includes every single curb. You know why? Exactly what you said. Because it's faster.
Yeah, very much so. We might see a move here from Pavel. They're up 4 positions from where they qualified, but they've decided that maybe one more would be just a little bit nicer for them, trying to go all the way around the outside the Andretti hairpin, but it just wasn't close enough. And there's some people already coming out of the pits, have taken that pit stop, or have taken that damage repair already.
Yeah, basically, if you use the one fast repair you are allotted in this race, it essentially makes your pit stop only as long as it takes to come down the length of pit road and start to stop. Otherwise, it's not it's a full repair. It completely rejuvenates the race car without having to sit there for 30, 50 seconds. It's instantaneous, essentially, when you get back out there. It's there specifically to not completely ruin your race. It's one of those interesting things that you only see in iRacing, that fast repair. As one of the cars has I'm off the racetrack, and I kept expecting them to turn left, but that car in a 4-wheel drift, that Toyota, and it disappeared into the tire barrier.
All Castro cars ended up taking another trip to the wall just after they've come out of the pits. That was the car that literally came out of the pits and joined this train, hoping to, recover some of their race, and they've ended up right back where they started. And I think we've been told that was the 197. That was Jordan Daly. So Jordan Daly not having a good time here today at Laguna Seca.
Well, it started off nicely enough, immediately got inside the top 5, and I think was dirt tracking the car, as we'd say here in the States, and ended up dirt tracking it all the way into the wall. That'll be considerable damage for the man that was previously inside the top 5. Look at this. Still, at this point of the race, we're just about 12 minutes into the 1 hour race, and we've still got the classes intermingling. We've still got a hotly contested battle. I will say, for the most part, everybody behaving themselves.
Yeah, very much so. And at the minute, this is probably a battle that Joe Dorber doesn't necessarily want. He's got Gunny Sue behind him. That is, obviously one of the Toyotas, much faster through the corners in a straight line. But Joe Dorber's just managing to use the pace he's got. But right behind them, that's Camperger. That is in his class. And just behind that as well is where he cannot Joe Dorber can't really afford to fight Gunny Sue, but he's just kind of having to.
Well, this is interesting. Camperger is sitting there thinking, well, if they make a mistake, I'm going to get to go by. But they might have to, of course, because Ware's right there. So is Verstraeten right in that group as well. Lev Stevenson's closing in. I know he's 4.5 seconds off, but he's only going to get closer if this continues to be an issue. But there you have it, Ismail. you know, trying to make it work. And now all of a sudden Dauber is behind the 6th place car right now, and that's a different car in a different class as well, as they're all according together again. Hard to tell what Joe's driving out of, the windshield or the rearview mirror at this point.
I think if both is an answer that could be said, it will be both for Joe Dauber, just having to, you know, constantly keep an eye on what's going on behind him, and he's definitely catching this Toyota up ahead. So the pace for that Mazda is definitely there. It might be a look onto the inside. It is going to be a look into the Andretti hairpin late on the brakes. You see the nose dive down, and Joe Dauber, I think he's going to have the position done. Now that is a big sigh of relief, because now he can put almost 2 Toyotas between him and his class. Oh, no,
Back down the inside. Sindelar is taking a look down the inside. More importantly than anything he did there, he may have let the Mazda through, but for the very moment, he cut off Ismail Gunnisu there, and now he's going to be down the inside is Gunnisu, and here is Sindelar trying to defend a little bit here around the outside, knowing that the next corner favors him. Here's a Mazda looking up the inside, backs off at the last possible second. Sindelar able to hold on to the spot. Gunnisu, though, does the very same, and Kempferger has to back off for the 3rd time, and Mike, they lose a spot to the straighten now in a Toyota coming through the field. This is chaos at the front of the Mazda Cup field.
Well, now for Joe Dauber, he'll be hoping that these people, these lot behind, start to battle each other and give him just a little bit of space, but it's going to be too much for the 22. He hugged that drain, and the Joe Dauber, your leader of the Mazda class, has spun off.
Oh my goodness, that was not exactly what you wanted to see. Joe Dauber, leading the Mazda class, has had an incident into the corkscrew, and that has led them many places behind. That has given the lead to Ryan Ware now in 9th place overall, and just barely in front of Kempferger, who has lost a spot after all of that transpired with the Toyotas, with the spin. New leader, Ryan Ware.
And Ryan Ware up 5 places from where they qualified. So for the driver of the 32, it's going great guns today, but that is not all said and done, as the 2 Toyotas in front come into contact and tangle themselves one another, rejoining, and now it's going to do once again. It's going to bunch the Mazdas up together, and it's going to end up where it's now almost position, you know, it's a more of an advantage for Kempferger behind.
Sure is. Verstraeten now up into 7th place, trying to close the gap. It's 1.2 seconds to Sindelar in 6th place. That has done nothing but further frustrate Ismail in 8th place. Kempferger now trying to make that move, and has made the move on Ware, has taken the lead of the Mazda Cup class. An excellent job, some fantastic racing here, but now, just like what happened to Dauber a few minutes ago, you've got to be aware it can happen to you too. You got to be on your game.
And also, should I remind you, Jesse, that meanwhile, while all of this is happening on, it's been 15 minutes into the race.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible. You would expect at some point, Ryan, wouldn't you, lap traffic's going to come into play for a lot of these drivers as well. But my goodness, what an electric first 15 minutes here for us on this platform. And these drivers have put on a show. They've had a bunch of single car spins, a lot of them not amounting to any damage as time loss, but a couple of quite severe ones, but no real contact between our competitors thus far.
No, not really. And Bart Matcher there doing the exact same move that he did earlier on his teammate, throwing it around the outside, and Jan Yer now sits in the 14th place. Will be wanting to get back onto the back of Bart Matcher, but I believe I think both of these drivers have done iRacing before, so it's interesting to see, you know, there's some of the regular names you have to think, has this person driven iRacing before? And if yes, then they'll probably be able to get back to them, but it'd be definitely, if you threw me into this grid, I think I'd be about 8 seconds off the leader. I would have not a clue what I'm doing.
I've got that weird feeling where I would love to take my Mazda Cup car out there right now. You know, I would miss this race for anything in the world with you, partner, but I'm telling you, I have got the itch to do some racing like this. If it's going to be like this, and I don't have any reason to believe it won't be, this is incredible, close racing action. And every turn, every curb you hit, every time you drive off the track, that is crucially important. Jokingly in chat, someone's asking for a drive-through penalty for Johnson to make it fun. They said, we'll talk about that when they get 30 seconds ahead. We'll come back. We'll get back to you.
We'll file that under the due consideration pile. We've also been told in the updates, Tom Watts has had an incident, we shall say.
Certainly has. Tom Watts is in P5 for the time being. He's still on the board in P5. I'm not sure exactly what's going on with him. Verstraeten, by the way, who got by Gunnisu, has got by Sindelar, and now up into sixth place, but still racing very hard with Sindelar to maintain that position, and he will just barely be able to do that as Verstraeten has gained 9 places since the start of this race. And that last lap he ran, despite the fact he was in traffic, despite the fact that he was fighting for a position, still ran a 37.5.
Yeah, so it shows that you can still have some very, very close great racing and keep the pace up, because there is, there is enough room on the track for these cars a lot of times to go too wide, and we're seeing it all over. Switching back down to the Mazda class, this is Jan Yo. He hasn't fallen off the back of Bart Matcha at all. I said that Bart managed to throw it around the outside. Jan looks a little bit stronger in sectors 1 and 2. It's going to be very close coming up to the corkscrew. We might see a look there from the inside of the 48. Hard on the brakes, so you've got to get the car settled. You don't want to sort of end up what happened to Joe Dorr, but you take too much of that inside the gutter and it will spit these little Mazdas out. They just don't have the weight to kind of power over it, and coming back down the hill you got to be very careful on the weight transfer. Gravity goes from helping you to hindering you on the way down, and the 48 very, very close, but it just seems that Bart Matcha has got this final turn nailed down.
Bart Matcha hanging tough on Yan Yo. These two, no stranger to each other, racing, but perhaps for the very first time racing each other in iRacing. Question from the chat: are the Toyotas and the BMW M2 touring car comparable? I don't have data on that. I would like to answer that. I didn't want to leave you hanging, but I don't know. I wonder if the BMW would be a bit quicker, and I'm pretty sure it is, simply because I think the M2 has a little bit more aero, maybe a little bit more engine punch compared to the GR86. So I would hazard the guess that the BMW would be quicker than a Toyota GR86.
Well, now we know what the next what the next data we need to get. And I'm being shouted at by our broadcaster Ryan Gill in my ear that I need to go and drive here. I like how I've been demoted to now. Can I have a new job title? Can I have a new title, Ryan Gill? Can I be the RCI iRacing test driver? And I will give you completely useless information because I have no idea what I'm doing. Apparently we're being told to hold station. I'm scared, Jesse. What's Ryan doing?
Oh my goodness. Can I just say I am sandwiched in between two Ryans today. It's my favorite place to be. I've got Ryan Gill on the cameras and the broadcast today, and I've got Ryan Mawson in the booth. It's just like old times up here today, and I'm pretty confident. Ryan Mawson, you called it a demotion. I'm pretty sure it's a promotion. Ryan Mawson just got promoted to lead test driver, I think.
Don't worry, Jesse Lee, I will give you all the information. It'll be completely useless. Completely and utterly useless, but I can give you some of them.
I'll take all the data we can get, and beyond that, I am quite confident now that I've thought about it a little further. The BMW M2 being a bespoke race car, a touring car, would be quicker than the GR86 car, which is still production based, and I think it has a way less punchy engine to begin with, which realistically is what I think has made this race that we're watching so very interesting, isn't it? It's the lack of horsepower, the lack of grip has created good racing. I think a lot of other racing series could learn a thing or two.
Yeah, I'm always quite a fan of the low-powered car racing, because you end up with moments like this where you just can't escape one another, and slipstream really starts to come into effect, and managing your car is a big part of it. As Jan Yer has managed to get by Bart Matcher once again, so Jan ends up in the 13th place. How long will that be though before Bart tries to do that final corner maneuver? Although Jan might be a little bit more in keen with it this time. And the 29 now of Sindelar, sandwiched in a big train of Toyotas. This is essentially P5 is just off our cameras, but Malcolm, what has happened to them?
They've come into pit lane. Yeah, they voluntarily came into pit lane. They've come out of what was a top 5 position and are now free falling through the field. Don't know if that was an incident. You'd have to imagine it was something that has caused them to come into pit road along those lines. But that has happened. Malcolm out of the top 5, likely going to be outside the top 20, and is now after that pit stop. And that will update the top 5. And still this man, Jordan Johnson, way out in front of the field. He's run a 35.6 in the race. That's incredible speed. Last lap of 37.0, and I'm quite confident maybe there was some sort of traffic involved at that point. Don't know, but 21.5 seconds in front of the second place car. Phil Malter, DeZalt, and Verstraeten now your top 5. Verstraeten has gained 10 plus positions in this race, including about 5 in his own class. That is incredible.
Like you said, incredible driving, just managing to keep yourselves clean. Did see that Toyota still sat in the pits as well, so something definitely is more than a fast repair has happened to Malcolm. They are still sat there as far as I can see, and this train still going back to it. This is 6th, 7th and 8th all bunched up together.
Could that have been fuel, I wonder, for Malcolm in that car? Maybe did the fuel wrong? We see that from time to time in sim racing. There's a potential that you left it on quali fuel. You weren't thinking about it, but until we have that confirmed, it's just speculation, of course.
And we're being told as well, luckily, well, it depends if you think luckily or unluckily, this was a fixed setup race, so you only had 2 setups to choose from. You had the quali one, which is just a little bit sharper on its toes, and then the race one, which is what everyone here will be using. And I think that's also what has made this racing so close, is that there's no changes and differentials in the setups. What you have is the difference in the drivers here. People who are either very used to iRacing, or the people who really can push these low horsepower slidey cars around, because some people really struggle when you take all their grip and the downforce away from them.
It is very true. Could be some of that as well. By the way, we talked about Verstraeten making the pass on Sindelar. They've driven away to just about a second, but Gunnisu has not let Sindelar get away. That battle from about 10 minutes ago has not really died out. They're just sort of feeling each other out, pacing each other. Schamberger leading in the Cup class to this man, Ryan Ware. He's up 4 spots from the start, and he has also not dropped off of that battle. Schamberger and Ware still locked in a battle, and I was reading chat earlier, Ryan, and I was talking about the Ryan sandwich I was in. I didn't even notice we were watching Ryan Ware at the time. 3 Ryans. How many Ryans is too many Ryans? Not 3. I think that's a perfect amount.
Well, you had it on before we went live. You had the problem that when me and Ryan Gill, we don't work together often. It's when Jesse Lee comes into the box and says, "Okay, Ryan," and then both of us almost in sync go, "Which one?" So yeah. you have to specify now, and now we're going to have to specify the 3-way. We're talking about the broadcast Ryan, commentator Ryan, or racing Ryan.
Yeah, I'm used to working with one on any given particular project, and I'm used to saying Ryan, but here we are in a situation where we have a double trouble situation going on, and now it's a 3-way with Ryan Ware, who just seems to be pacing the Mazda Cup leader. Schamberger not driving away. Ware doesn't seem to be overly interested in overdriving his car as well. It's just it just looks like a measured approach to me, trying not to overdrive the car. Of course, the Mazda Cup car, a manual as well, so they will be shifting. Now, a lot of drivers do the iRacing trick where they don't use a dog box shifter. They use they use the flappy paddles, of course, and that actually is, at least last time I checked, a little bit quicker on these Mazda Cup cars. It's nothing illegal about that, but a lot of times you will see drivers use that for just, I'm talking maybe a thousandth of a second you gain from using paddle shifters versus a gated shifter.
Probably around about, but then you'll get people like me who are weird and or nostalgic and will want to use a dog box.
I tell you what, nothing ever seems more insane to me than taking a Group C car to a place like Le Mans and trying to drive that with an actual shifter. And to think people did stuff like that back in the day, or a Formula One car from the 80s, for instance, the 70s and the 80s, back before flappy paddles was a thing, they still shifted those manually. It's just insane to me how many shifts, especially when you had 7 gears in some of those cars.
Yeah, very much so. You'd be working that. You'd be working the gearbox very hard the whole race, and a lot of times as well. You go back to some of the 80s IMSA cars, big, massive turbos. They are terrifying when they get on power, and then you've still got to do a manual shift for that. But we've been pointed out by our broadcaster Ryan Gill. It's CLR on CLR. It is Bart Matcher has found himself behind Martin Lawrence. So something's happened to Bart Matcher, and I'm going to say the damage on the right side of the car is maybe indicative of what happened to the 27.
Yeah, of course, do remember Martin Lawrence about 15 minutes ago span off into the Andretti hairpin. Didn't hit anything, thought they'd be okay, because, again, they also spun off in the dirt, which means little to no tire damage, but you can definitely see the right side of Bart Matcher's car is pretty much destroyed. The hood is askew, the entire fender is pushed in, the HWT decal completely gone off the side of that Mazda Cup car. Pretty much certainly hit something and hit it pretty good. Yeah,
so Bart Matcher's now got to kind of nurse this car home. Obviously has the option of having a the fast repair, but has elected not to. And Rob Taplin's come down the pit lane, but that is a very sad Toyota.
There is supposed to be a hood on that car. If you order a Toyota GR86, they come with a hood.
You mean it's not part of the advanced, lightweight package? And there we go. The 7 is good as new and fixed.
That is a excellent example of what the repair does to the car. It fixes it up very nicely indeed. And just as we saw a destroyed GR86, we saw a completely renewed one there to show you what the two look like. One of the interesting things about iRacing, of course, the damage model that they've been improving on for the last several years has gotten to a level that is almost unrivaled in sim racing these days. The amount of damage you can get on any particular car, you can lose your hood, wings, stuff like that. And rather unfortunately for Taplin, he got to illustrate that to us for the very first time. Now that was close off the final turn.
That was quite close. You see Sindelar and Gunnisu diving down with some of the lap traffic there. I thought there might be a little bit closer, but it was just about enough room. But as he says, not only the damage model, what you can lose, but the damage of what you can actually, damage on the cars for some of the for the higher end and the faster cars, the LMPs and stuff. Floor damage is a real big issue for them, and you can have, like you said, varying degrees of suspension damage. You can blow engines, you can overheat the cars, you can, if you're running in a pack so close to one another for an entire straight for hours, you'll see the temperature start to creep up on the oil and everything. You've got to kind of keep an eye on it. It's much more involved keeping some of the cars alive in a race, which makes then some of the endurance races, even more of a success when you cross the line, because not only did you, have the pace, you had the race, but your car actually held up for you.
Certainly is. And I talked about the 24 at Daytona, for instance, and it's the same for Le Mans or any other race you'd see. specifically on this sim, you work it out as a team that you can't be hitting every curb, you can't be bouncing off of things, and you can't be damaging the part of the car you can't see, the under tray. And a lot of times, especially in a prototype, you do stuff like that, and you run a lap that maybe is about a second slower, and you start to wonder, is that the tires going off, or is that because I've damaged the under tray of the car? Of course, very hard to see when you've done it, and can even a lot of time you don't really feel it. It just, you kind of notice it in straight line speed a little bit, and that sort of thing. So one more thing for every one of these drivers to have to sit here and contemplate.
Yeah, very much so, and that'll be one. It'll be very interesting to see, you know, and that's the thing that we're going to have to learn slowly of what, you know, what has happened to this car. It's not necessarily anymore just that their tires have gone. It can be all this additional damage, as Phil Webb really still on the back of the 727 ahead, trying everything to get by. But here comes the Toyota into the fray.
Adamczyk trying to hold up Webb, trying to use him as a pick. Webb going down the inside. What will the Toyota do? Backs off, says, I don't want anything to do with this. I'm going to let you figure this out, and then I'll take my turn. That's Bodu in the 19th place position in the Toyota there. I think being incredibly respectful here. And now that that battle has come to its natural conclusion, Phil Webb gaining a spot there. Now will we see Bodu try to make the move on Adamczyk to try and gain themselves a spot back. Of course, Wolf is only 3.7 seconds behind them.
And I think there you go, the Mazda moves to the inside and the Bodu goes through. So then I think it'll be a bit of a similar story onto when they catch up to the back of Webb. Just waiting for that moment. And past they go, and then no one really loses any time just with the, you know, the speed of the Toyota. And jumping back up a little bit further up the grid, Gunny Sue through the windscreen there, looking at the back of Verstappen and still trying to push that 73 up higher. But Sindelar has not fallen off the back of them this entire time.
It's been really interesting to see this. Verstappen had more than a second lead at one point. Gunny Sue has gained a little bit of ground in that respect, and Sindelar has hung on to the back of this pack as well. Tom Watts has not really caught up to this group, but these three who were quite close and completely changed their orientation around about 15 or so minutes ago continue to pace each other here at this stage of the race just after halfway. And I found that interesting because Verstappen flew up here and I just expected them to drive away. They haven't really done that. Gunny Sue, who gave up 3 positions, Ismail did. I expected them to fall back. They haven't done that. Sindelar, who I thought would have probably been in the middle of the two, finds themselves at the back of this train. Just, it's not always what it seems like, I suppose.
Yeah, very much so. It's, as he says, it's kind of holding station, but I'm wondering if maybe, you know, Verstappen was a lot happier on the fresher tyres, and it might just be a driver that is now struggling as the grip is slowly coming down and down, and we've got a spinning Toyota, 2 people going wide to avoid it. Now this is going to bunch people up.
Oh, it's a crash! Crash on the front straight. Several cars going by. Maybe they were 3 wide. The mirrors not using or not able to spare them the drama here as a very rare crash. One driver is teleported back to the pit lane, and one more, the initial D inspired car, into the wall hard. The car completely destroyed. Local Yellow waved, but that was a very scary moment and some major contact there.
Major damage for one of the cars, and I think in the background we can just about see it still going along. But yeah, very sort of strange incident, that a slow car at the edge and everyone bunched up trying to find space, probably trying to get out of each other's way, and just tangled themselves to the Toyotas.
Wow, that was a scary moment. I didn't expect when they got off that corner. I just expected it to be okay. And a little bit of a drift and a tap, and that's all she wrote. Those concrete walls, there's no safer barrier, there's no sand pit at that point, it's just 2 concrete walls. And that's exactly what got them and caught them out. Now, you see a car return to the pit lane, that doesn't mean that they're out. That car goes into a towing state, meaning that however much time the sim seems to think it would require to tow that car to pit lane is how much time the controls are locked for. Then you can start to work on the car, but that's massive damage. I would assume some 30 seconds to a minute at least.
At least so we'll see if that car rejoins the circuit, but it's going to be a bit of a time before they rejoin. The 171, Martin Lawrence, trying to get himself back up, now finds himself behind Yan Yo there in the 48 car. Still trying to sort of recover from that spin earlier, and there you go. There is that 31 car. Dolezal, heavy damage on that Toyota, and also missing his hood. Maybe Toyota needs to implement some better hood pins on these cars.
Pavel Dazal coming down into the pit lane, and that's as easy as it is. Now, has Pavel used their quick repair yet? I don't know. I can't tell you that, but the car has been fixed, and they went the long way around to avoid being towed. If you can drive it back around, even if it's severely damaged, a lot of times it is more advantageous. A tow time right around the pit straight should be around two and a half minutes or so, and a lap time obviously is a lot less than that. And even if you're damaged, you're still looking at saving 30 seconds by driving it. You can tell that the track has now been completely covered in cloud. We saw a dark one over our heads a moment ago, and it is blanketed the racetrack now, and that'll do nothing but improve the lap times and might even help the tire life a little bit. But yeah, look at that. That's the cloud we're talking about. No rain in that cloud, by the way. Just a very dark moment over the racetrack as the sunlight has left us for the time being.
As another Toyota dives down the pits, but yeah, that is now where the track will start to slowly cool off, as you mentioned earlier, because it's not been baked by the sun. But now for the drivers, you know, you've just had some of your light taken away from you. It might be a little bit advantageous in some areas without the sun in your eyes, but now certain parts of the circuit that maybe you used as markers will have changed the color that they once was, as this battle still rages on. And that's Les Stevenson bringing up the back in his incredibly pink Toyota.
Yeah, we had a chatter earlier talking about the lack of pink cars. Well, there's at least one, and it's Les Stevenson having a little bit of a blinking issue. That's also a iRacing thing. Cars doing that when they don't sync correctly, but it's all gone to plan for Les Stevenson, up 11 spots.
And up on the inside, the 24 sort of has to, you know, brake late, and there you go, up on the inside of the Mazda. The Mazda's doing great guns today, though, showing their you know, the competitiveness and the and kind of how consistent they can be just outside of the top 5 today.
Martin Lawrence has caught Yan Yo for 10th place, and I believe 4th place in their class. Lawrence appears to have damage on the left side of that car. Look at the front left fender well of Martin Lawrence's blue and white Mazda. Yeah, indeed, that fender is askew just a little bit, but certainly hasn't hurt the pace of that car thus far on the back of 4th place.
No, and Martin Lawrence, no stranger to racing here at RCI, but probably a little bit, you know, I say a little bit. Usually Martin is the guy we're talking about way up at the front of the grid. I can't really say I've ever seen Martin in a iRacing event, but you know, here we go. Look at this slipstream slowly bringing in the Mazda. Did you notice, as well as our broadcaster did, the IndyCar stickers adorned on Martin Lawrence's car? He's going to try and go around the outside. It's a long way trying to get the cutback into the hairpin, but it isn't going to be. That's the other problem with some of the lower power cars. Taking the long line, as much as you could, you know, use it to gain a little bit of extra speed in a car like a GE3, it just doesn't work in such of these low-powered cars because it's just taking a longer line.
Yeah, the thing is, scrubbing off speed is the big issue, and a lot of times you would think going the longer distance, scrubbing off less is better, but it typically is, but there are times where it's not. Hairpins, it doesn't really work, because even if you are going a bit quicker, taking the wider line, it's still better to spend the least amount of time in the corner at that point. So hairpins, it doesn't really work. If it's a sweeping turn, you could probably think about it, but if the driver around the inside is able to flat-foot it around the inside, then going around the outside is not going to do anything for you, really, in the span of a single corner. Martin Lawrence riding on board his splitter cam in the front of his car. And there we have the track map showing you where all the cars are. Now, we're nearing the three-quarter mark in this race, and you can see all these cars, all 33, 34 of them, started next to each other in one long line. And this is what it looks like now with all the cars around the racetrack. Of course, the car we're on is encircled in a green halo, that being the number 11 Martin Lawrence car.
And you can see as well the 18, and there is one of the local waved yellows, as the 18 has had an issue in the corkscrew. Martin is going to fire it up the inside of Jan Yo, contact into the door, and that's going to put another dent on the opposite side of his Mazda. Continues along, and that's the other thing in iRacing, is that you can like bash doors to one another. You can quite have some elbows out racing, and it does not ruin your race.
No, that was excellently put, Ryan, because that's exactly what that was. That was elbows out racing. Absolutely dented the other side of that car, and I think now both of the front fenders of Lawrence's car match each other, so for symmetry, it's working out very well. The speedo in the bottom right corner shows you just how quick the car's going, and yeah, pretty much what I expected through there. And a lot of cars you have to slow down massively to make it that left-hander going up the hill, but not so much in a Mazda Cup car. And that is, of course, why you see them so frequently get it wrong, because you are going quite quick indeed for the car they're in. But Yen Yo will be aware of what just happened to them and probably won't appreciate them scratching up their anime.
Very much not, and also that we'll know that Martin Lawrence isn't exactly here to play. It is going to be a big dive up from the inside of the 171, but Jan Yo isn't phased by it and just takes his normal line. He knows that you can't react to that and ruin your run out onto the main straight, because then you will be passed. Whereas if you just take your line now, you're in a space where you can just about defend it. Is it going to be another look from Martin Lawrence on the inside this time? Decides not. It's going to sit behind Jan Yo and try and look for that one moment where they can slingshot them.
I think Martin has told Yo everything he needs to know about his defense. He's going to have to do a stout one. Otherwise, Martin Lawrence is going to dive down the inside. Not close enough here. Also, too, might seem funny to some, you can get a little bit of a draft in these cars, even at a track like this that is not quite the straightest racetrack that you'll ever go to in a Cup car. But even so, because of the small compact engine and all of that, you can get a little bit of a draft, and you can use that. You can tow yourself around this entire racetrack and gain a little bit of time. Martin Lawrence has probably found that out, and I think also that is what's led to several of the fights. We talked about Sindelar and Verstraeten earlier on, why they're so close. I think they're so relative on pace that all they need is that little bit of toe each lap, and they're sticking like glue to each other. I think this is what's happening here. Though I will say, even with damage, Lawrence still looks a little bit more feisty for my money.
I think as well with the Mazdas, you can have a little bit of damage and it not really be as detrimental as cars that heavily rely on their aero, whereas the Mazdas, you can have a few knocks and scrapes, and as long as you're not damaging the suspension, you're probably good to go. And it's going to be a lot closer this time from Martin Lawrence. We might see a move coming here into the Andretti hairpin once again. It's going to have to look to the outside because it's just defended on the inside. Might try swoop back around, but we saw what happened the last time. The gap was there, but then it was firmly shut by Jan Yo, and this time, once again, Martin has to fall back in line.
Well, close stuff here for what is P4 in class in front of them. Kempferger leading the class, 2.5 seconds behind them is Ryan Ware. And remember, they were quite close earlier on. The gap going the way of Kempferger out in front of the Mazda Cup cars. And then you got Les Stevenson in 8th place. That's a Toyota, and that's what the yellow dash means. The blue dash is a Mazda, of course. Then behind them, Joe Dauber, who once led this race and had I'm pretty sure I'm correct in saying, a self-induced accident and found themselves way down the order. They climbed back up to 3rd. They're 5 seconds behind Stevenson, which is right behind Ware. So you could make the argument that they're only 5.5 seconds behind second place in the class. What a defense that was by Ryan Ware on Les Stevenson, 2 different class of cars.
Ooh, that was a bit of a scary moment here for Ryan Ware, because he is still net P2 in his own class, having to defend from Les Stevenson in the pink Toyota, looking this way, looking that way. But the 32 unfazed and continues on, has had a brilliant race as the 32, up 7 positions from where they started.
Why would you defend Les Stevenson here? Wouldn't you assume, Ryan, it's more beneficial to let Les go and catch Camferger and maybe slow them down a little bit rather than losing time yourself?
Or maybe also they might be a little bit worried that if Les can't, get up the road as fast and they start to lose time, Joe Dauber is not a million miles away from them, only 4.7 seconds, but the 24's got the run. It's going to be made whether they like it or not. Oh, there's going to be coming to everyone, there's contact.
Oh,
the 32
no.
has been bundled off.
Oh, and it's going to be more chaos here coming back onto the racetrack. Ryan Ware just about getting it after making huge contact with Les Stevenson and then contact with the wall, able to get it back together, but that car is absolutely totaled on the left side. Les Stevenson gets through, and might I say, that looked a bit personal.
There you go. Look, you've also, with 12 minutes of the race to go, look who's right behind you, Joe Dauber, who's been on the charge since they had that self-induced spin. But as you says, that side of that motor car is destroyed after hitting the wall.
That was incredible. I'm still not sure what exactly we just saw. Camferger may or may not know what just happened to P2 in the class. They're not P2 anymore, as Ryan Ware bringing their number 32 Mazda down into the pit lanes. Certainly some sort of damage, likely steering related on that race car. That has promoted Joe Dauber back up into second place, and maybe more importantly, more excitingly anyway, the battle that was for fourth place between Lawrence and Yo, who, by the way, are continuing to swap that position as we speak. That is now for third place. Lawrence in front of Yo for the time being. Behind them, this fight. This is for 14th. Ted Edwards in the Christmas car. This is Phil Webb looking for a way to make the pass. Going to have to go the long way. Ted defends down the inside, down into Andretti. Is there overlap? No. Yes, there is. They're side by side. And as long as Ted Edwards doesn't run out the corner, and he doesn't, that is an excellent defense from Ted Edwards in the Christmas car.
Where does rejoin the track just behind these lots, so they will see the checkered flag. Will the 32, the car looking a lot more fresh than when it entered the pit lane, as Phil Webb still tries to work everything they can on the back of Ted Edwards. But Ted knows, Ted's no stranger to having to defend, and a very good defensive driver. And I think that will definitely translate over into the Mazdas.
Yeah, that's very interesting, too, to point out. Ted does have iRacing experience. We talked about a little bit about that earlier, as Webb nearly runs out of racing real estate. Not the biggest deal in a Mazda Cup car, I will admit. You can get a nice four-wheel drift in these cars. It's not the biggest deal. It's not like you run off the track and you immediately run out of grip. And it doesn't really slow you down much either. It is scary. It is like being on ice, but if you're aware of it, you can control it like that. What you don't want to do is hook a curb in these cars. That is a almost automatic death sentence in these automobiles, but none of that happening here. By the way, just to confirm, Martin Lawrence did get by Yan Yo for third place, and that was a heck of a battle between the two of them. They traded the spot back a few times, and now it looks like Lawrence way out in front. That's P3. Camferger has the better part of, I'd say, 8-9 seconds lead in that class. And of course, Johnson running away with it in the Toyota class right now.
Yeah, right. I think there's running away with it, and then there's just been a complete massacre really from Johnson there in the Toyota class. And the funny thing was that I was the one who put them onto this. I knew that we had an
Oh,
iRacing
this is your
event on.
fault.
Yeah. I knew we had an iRacing event on. I says, oh, you do the iRacings, don't you? Because I race with them in ACC, and you know that we've had quite a good few scraps. So I was like, oh, you do the iRacings. Do you want to come do this? They went, yeah, sure. I might be a little bit fast though. I says, well, you know, you race me, and I race all these people, so it'll be good. Nope, turns out that they're a lot faster in iRacing than they are in ACC. So well done, Johnson, and you've proved you're very speedy.
I will admit, I feel a little bit like that Vince McMahon meme. You know, it was me, Austin, it was me all along. I feel a little bit like that right now as we continue to watch this great battle between Edwards and Webb over what is effectively 13th place right now, as other cars have had their issues. Webb closing back in. Question from the chat, is it 1 hour plus 1 lap? I don't believe so. I believe it's 1 hour, and the checkered flag comes out after that happens. So wherever the leader is, the checkered flag will come out, and that is how it is. So no plus 1 lap today. Good question. And all, again, goes with the territory. New simulator for us here as well. But my goodness, final 7 minutes of the race, and there's going to be a lot to talk about after this is over. One thing talk about, bragging rights. Doesn't matter if you win this race, it's about who made the best moves, I think, on some instances as well. It's going to be a lot to talk about amongst the drivers.
Oh yeah, definitely so, and a lot of you know times there's going to be people learning from this, and like you said, as being part of the first one ever, it's just such a you know neat experience. As Phil Webb has managed to get alongside Ted Edwards, Ted's going to try and hang it down low. We're going to have to close it off. It will mean that the 95 will have a little bit better run, but having to go the long way, it means that you end up with that you know you've just lost a little bit more ground, and there you go through the fast left, still very close. Phil Webb's still all over the back of Ted Edwards. It's not going to be enough of a lunge, I don't think, into the corkscrew. We've seen it a few times, but the Mazdas, which are already sliding around everywhere, I think it's a bridge too far.
Yeah, I think it's just an excellent defensive job Ted's doing. Ted knows whenever Webb closes in where to put their car. Now, Webb has to learn that what Ted's doing, it's not the end-all be-all. Of course, you'd hate to think somebody would use the old chrome horn here at the end of the race, but I've seen it happen on more than a couple of occasions. I don't know if Phil Webb is that kind of driver, but it's something Ted, I think, at least has to game plan for. Well, if Webb gets close enough to me, what do I do? Do I give him the inside and try to defend, hoping that it's a good corner where I'm able to do that? Or do I just block down the inside and hold the brakes and hope I don't get moved? These are all possibilities that go through a driver's mind late in a race like this.
Yeah, very much so, and I think at the minute, if Ted manages to keep Sector 1, you know, clear, it appears that's where Webb's catching up, is through Sector 1 and into Sector 2. Can't really do anything to the 18 in Sector 3, so Ted Edwards managing to just hold station there. You see him come through a little bit of a curb once again, the 95 closing in with the slipstream that you'll get down the back straight as we go under the Mother's Bridge, but then coming up the hill, if they're still behind you now, you can't really make a massive lunge into the fast left.
You really can't. Ted's doing a really good job and not really losing time to Macha. I was wondering if they got into this battle, would Macha continue to pull away? And it's been sort of stagnant, that gap, for the time being, and that's unusual. Normally, you get locked into a two-way battle like this, you start losing time because you're having to augment your line. You have to do things that are not necessarily quick just to defend, but again, that hasn't been an issue here. Webb, about as close as he's ever been, takes a nice run off of the top of the hill, a little bit wide there from Ted Edwards. Webb's going to go the long way here. Defensive drive from Edwards again down to the final turn, late on the brakes, doing the crossover move. Webb over the curb, Webb down the inside. They should be just about side by side. Advantage here. Ted Edwards on the outside just barely, and I think he's going to get clear again, and only just. Does he come back over? No, he doesn't. Leaves to the inside. Webb's in there all of a sudden again because the inside was left open. Ted's going to have to give this up. Will it be a nice defense from Webb down the inside? It will be. He doesn't come off the apex, and it's job done. Phil Webb with the position. What an excellent battle for 5 laps.
It's such a massive battle there, but the Phil Webb has finally in the 95 come back into that 13th place after they had that earlier on in the race. They dropped all those positions, had that just monstrous moment, you know, that dropped them everything down. They're managing to come back up, and this battle that has been happening while we haven't even really been watching it. Ryan Lawrence, despite the damage, has kept the hammer down.
Wait, how did this happen?
Yeah,
hold on a minute.
He's now going for P2.
Hold on a minute. I talked about this. He was 8 or 9 seconds behind this group at one point. Somehow, Martin Lawrence has driven all the way up to potentially P2. Joe Dauber must have thought they were going to cruise home to a P2. It might have still been better for Dauber, having spun while leading the race, of course. But look at this. Down the inside, Martin Lawrence taking a look down the pit lane. You can't go down there. Goes to the outside, off of the racetrack. Wide entry down into the hairpin. Expertly done by Dauber to close off the inside and not come off the apex. Excellent racing between them. By the way, don't count out Yan Yo. Yan Yo is in this. It's a three-way fight for P2.
48's there in the background, just watching where you have to kind of have the best view from your windscreen. If anything's going to happen and these two are going to get tangled, well, it's all positions for Jan, and Martin Lawrence now will know as well that the checkered flag will come out on that 1 hour mark. They'll really be starting to push because they know that they've only got a limited amount of tries up ahead, but also traffic. The Toyota class still happening on the inside. It's going to be swing down the 25, takes the curb. Martin Lawrence,
more contact! More contact!
And that's the leader. That's Johnson.
Oh my goodness, Martin Lawrence is going to lose a spot. Got jammed in behind the Toyota car, and that has allowed Yan Yo to come through. Yo has come through, but Joe Dauber, because of all of that, has gained a couple of seconds, literally, on Yan Yo. Dauber now clear again. The gap was 8 seconds at one point. It was down to nothing a lap ago. Can Yan Yo, can Martin Lawrence close that gap one more time in just about a lap and a half to maybe 2 laps of racing? I think it's a tall ask.
Here comes the leader, Johnson, which I think this is going to be the final one because the timer ticks down. By the time they get round, the checkered flag will be waved. The 48 trying to run away from Martin Lawrence, but the leader of the race still wants to run the pace. It's going to be up the inside for the 12, hooking it onto the apex, and round they go. But all the meanwhile, Jan Yo is going to be looking in the mirror from the charging Martin Lawrence. He will want that podium position back.
He sure will. He's not going to give up. Martin Lawrence's car looks absolutely crunched, but it hasn't mattered all day to this point. No matter how damaged this looked, it still looked fast. It still looks fast. The steering appears straight, at least to my untrained eye, and Yan Yo is not going to give this up. He somehow has fought back 2 or 3 times today. That 48 car has not given up, and quite frankly, looks the cleanest of just about all of them thus far. Credit to Yo for that. Camferger, by the way, unaware of any of this chaos up the road, and just sort of hasn't relinquished it since he took it well and truly early on into the race. The leader right there had a little bit of an off, and that's backed them up, and that has further frustrated Yo, who has now been backed up again to Martin Lawrence.
Well, 3/10. If Martin Lawrence is going to do anything, it's going to be a late dive into the final corner. Jan's really got to nail the exit right. I think it's going to be a little bit further back. We might see a lunge from Martin, and we do. He's coming down to the inside, but I think it's going to be a bridge too far, as there goes Johnson, the winner of the race, the winner of the Toyota class. It is going to be Jordan Johnson across the line for the first race here at the RCI Laguna Seca iRacing event.
Incredible stuff. The checkered flag is out. Everyone crossing the line. Jordan Johnson wins the very first RCI iRacing event. Incredible scenes here. And Christian Camferger is going to do the very same whenever they come across. They will do the very same in the Mazda Cup class. Here's Brecha, by the way. We haven't talked a lot about Philippe Brecha today. They have had a quiet and distant second place, but they've kept Rudy Philmalter, Verstraeten, Sindelar, and the like at bay today. They're going to take home second place.
As he says, a very clean car on the 22 there, one we didn't have to talk about, but sometimes when you don't get talked about in the commentary, it means that you just had such a clean, calm race. And it will be Rudy Philmont who rounds out your podium position. Not that far away, there is the lights ablaze of Estrella, and Sindelar, it comes around in your top 5. Still very, very close, considering the cars, considering the racing, and considering the length of time that these guys have been racing. But here comes the 46 Panda car. It will be the winner of the Mazda class, Christian Kampfger.
Kampfger absolutely deserves this and might have not had the overall paces to Joe Dauber. We won't know if that's true or not, but it didn't matter. Just had the skill, and I talked about clean race cars. Look at that. I don't think there's a single dent in Christian's car. Well done to the Panda crew.
And then the P2 and P3 have already crossed it of Les Stevenson. Rounds out your, I think that's top 5 in the Toyota class. So you had Joe Dauber and Jan Yo managing to fend off the charging Martin Lawrence. That was, as much as we had all the excitement at the start of the race, those last few laps were just electric.
Sure was, and just an incredible race that we saw from flag to flag. Not a whole lot of contact car to car, though we did have our fair share. A lot of good racing, a lot of memories made here. I think that bodes very well for the future. The final cars coming across the line, and everybody else on a cool down lap. The results of the race confirmed for the RCI Goes iRacing special event. Jordan Johnson wins it by a landslide, 48 seconds. Philippe Bricha in second place. Rudy Philmalter in third. Verstraeten fourth. Sindelar inside the top 5. Kampfger wins it in the Mazda Cup class. Les Stevenson, Joe Dauber second in Mazda Cup. Yen Yo in the 9th place position and 3rd place in their class. And just inside the top 10, Martin Lawrence. Everyone else, Watts, Macha, Webb, Edwards, Dolzal, Buda, Marchand, and Taplin, the top 18. Of course, outside the top 18, you've got Wolf Ireland, Bryant, Stant, Ryan Ware. That's going to be disappointing for them. Of course, Huell, Gunny Sue, Malcolm Scott, Daly Wallace Grant, Cramp, Timmer, and Igor, your 33 drivers. A lot of the final drivers, of course, not finishing the race here today. Ryan Mawson, I'm going to throw it to you. Your thoughts of our race today here at WeatherTech Laguna Seca.
Well, as much as we expected it to be maybe a little bit more shoulders out racing, it was overall a very, very clean event for a first event. And it's just been amazing to see the two classes of cars fighting one another. You know, when that new Toyota came out, we weren't necessarily sure what it could do. We saw the pace in practice, we saw the pace in qualifying, but just in the race, it was such a spectacle, especially towards the end when everyone started to get bunched back up again. Manhandling the Mazdas around, the Toyotas trying to get themselves unlapped. It's just been a great event, really.
Well, you can see on the bottom of the screen, the race is over. The race director has posted a little bit of a message, and that means it is time for me to fulfill our promise to you. We promised you in 2022 we would go iRacing, and we just about made that come true. But for 2023, we are expecting to run many iRacing championships, including in the winter of 2023, our very first iRacing championship. Details to be determined in the new year, but do keep your eyes posted on the Discord. You can join our Discord with the link in the description of the video. The series, we can tell you, will be starting in January, so not too long from now, that series will be starting. All the details, though, as said, are to be determined. We would love to have you on the track with us for that event. If you enjoyed what you saw here, get involved. It doesn't really matter what your skill level is. We would love to have you come out and race with us in 2023. That's not the only announcement for 2023 we have. Of course, some folks might be worried, are we transitioning into an iRacing channel? Not really. That is not the case. We love all of our sims, and that means a new year for ACC in 2023 as well, and introducing the 6-hour challenge esports series. starting next year as well. Our very first esports series with a prize pool for those that want to enter that endurance racing series. It's our very first esports series. We would love to have you join us for that as well. And of course, as always, if you're not interested in the prize pool racing, don't worry, we're still community based. We're never going to change. We've got the 6-hour series without all of the extra stuff if you just want to race with the community. We got you covered. And as always, doesn't matter what your skill level is, we've got a split for you over there as well. Incredible racing at WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca today. It's been a historic day for us. We thank all of you for joining us on this inaugural stream. I want to thank my broadcaster, Ryan Mawson, or excuse me, our broadcaster, Ryan Gill. See, I knew that was going to happen. And of course, our my co-commentator, Ryan Mawson, for today's race. I was sandwiched between two Ryans. There was action all over the racetrack. Ryan Mawson, final thoughts.
Well, I'm glad that I was here for what is hopefully to be a long line of iRacing events here at RCI, alongside all the other sims that we've got planned. It's been some great racing, and hopefully someday I'll get to have a go on that side of the track rather than this side of the track.
Absolutely the case. Just to recap, iRacing in 2023 for RCI, a January series starting, a points championship series starting for that. And of course, our very first esports series starting next year as well. Got to join the Discord and go to racerci.com. Get involved. We want to see you here in 2023, no matter what sim you are interested in doing. A crazy race today, some very deserving winners, and the foundation set. All that's left is to thank everybody in the chat, everybody on the racetrack, and everybody here in the booth one last time. We'll be back with you a little bit later tonight for the Night Owl Winter Series finale. But for us, from right now, until next time, have a good night.
We'll see you hopefully at the next.